I still remember the moment I pushed myself away from the kitchen chair, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The plane tickets glowed on my laptop screen, casting a pale blue light across my face in the quiet kitchen. A round trip to San Diego, 2 passengers, me and my 8-year-old son, Liam Harris. One click of the mouse echoed in my head like a declaration. It's over, Megan. 3 years of living in the shadows end today. 3 years ago, my husband, Andrew Harris, was declared dead in a bizarre accident during a business trip. There was no body, just a hastily written report and a death certificate handed to me with practiced sympathy. I still remember that day like a scar I can't erase, standing in this very kitchen, holding Liam while a trembling colleague said, "He's gone. I'm so sorry." I collapsed on the floor, feeling the world split open and swallow us whole. From that day on, I lived like a ghost. I had once loved Andrew so much I endured his endless work trips, his late-night calls, and the growing coldness in his voice. I told myself he was just busy, that he would change, but instead he disappeared. Suddenly, permanently, or at least that's what I thought. Since that day, I swore to live for Liam. I sold my wedding ring to pay part of our mortgage, took a full-time job at a local bank, and refused to let myself rest. Every spare minute was spent trying to fill the emptiness I saw in my son's eyes. Liam didn't ask about his dad much, but every time he did, it was like a blade twisting inside me. Today, when I bought those tickets to San Diego, I wasn't just buying a vacation. I was buying a promise to myself, to move forward, to smile again, to teach my son that life isn't only about loss. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. Liam ran in from the living room with a wide grin the moment he heard we were going to the beach. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You're going to be happier there, right, Mom?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something new for us. There was a time when my life felt like something out of a glossy magazine spread. Andrew Harris wasn't just handsome. He had that kind of effortless charm that made people lean in when he spoke, and that quick wit that made me laugh even on the worst days. I met him when I was 25, a junior loan officer at the bank, still figuring out who I was. He walked in with that confident stride, looking like he owned the room, asking questions about mortgage packages as if he already knew all the answers. By the end of that meeting, I was smitten, and he knew it. We married a year later. At first, it was the kind of marriage people envy: weekend hikes in the Rockies, wine nights under the stars, spontaneous road trips just because we could. Andrew had recently moved into financial brokerage and quickly became one of the rising stars in his firm. I felt proud standing next to him at office parties, his arm draped over my shoulder like we were building something unshakable. And then Liam came along. My sweet boy, our miracle. I thought Andrew would settle down, trade late-night work calls for bedtime stories, choose family dinners over client dinners. Instead, it went the other way. He became even busier, traveling to meet investors and close deals in places I'd never even heard of. There were months when Liam barely saw his dad except in passing, Andrew kissing his forehead at 6 a.m, and me pretending not to hear the front door close at midnight. I tried to talk to him about it, at first gently, then desperately. "Andrew, you're missing his childhood," I said one night, standing in the kitchen with tears I refused to let fall. He wrapped an arm around me, kissed my hair, and promised it was just for a season, that all his long hours were to build us a secure future. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did believe him, until the day he simply didn't come home. At first, I thought it was just another trip he'd forgotten to mention. Then his phone went straight to voicemail. For 3 days I told Liam, "Daddy's busy, honey, he'll be home soon," even as dread curled in my stomach like a fist. On the 4th day, the call came. An accident. A snowmobile going through thin ice on a remote river in Idaho, swept away by a current so strong they said divers couldn't recover a body. I remember holding that phone, hearing the words, and feeling my knees give out. My little boy looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, confused as I sat on the kitchen floor, clutching the phone to my chest. I thought about all the missed birthdays, the silent dinners, the lonely nights, and hated myself for still loving him even then. They issued a death certificate a week later, a neatly printed piece of paper, legally binding, sealing my life into a chapter one hadn't agreed to end. I buried an empty urn because there was no body to bury, no closure, just silence. And in that silence, I built walls around my heart, so high that even Liam noticed. "Mommy, why don't you smile anymore?" he asked one night. I smiled anyway, because what else could I do? For 3 years, I convinced myself I was healing, that I was strong. But grief has a way of sticking like glue. You can scrub and scrape, but it clings to your soul. That's why this trip to San Diego wasn't just about beaches and sunshine. It was about breathing again, even if just for a week. I had no idea how quickly those walls I'd built were about to crack. 3 years had a way of changing everything and nothing at all. I learned to wake up without expecting Andrew's voice in the kitchen. I learned to pay bills, fix leaky faucets, and show up at every one of Liam's soccer games without anyone else in the stands for us. I became the woman who smiled politely when people offered condolences, who waved off concerned questions from coworkers, who convinced herself she was fine, even when I wasn't. Denver became quieter in those 3 years. Our friends slowly stopped calling, not out of cruelty, just because life moves on. Mine felt frozen, like winter refusing to thaw. I poured myself into work at the bank, built a routine that left little room for feelings, and clung to Liam like a lifeline. He became my reason for everything. If I felt too tired to get out of bed, I reminded myself, he needs breakfast, he needs school, he needs you to be strong. Liam grew fast, too fast. One day I was teaching him how to tie his shoes, and the next he was telling me which superhero movies I just had to see. And lately, the questions about his dad had started again, quiet ones whispered at bedtime when he thought I couldn't hear the sadness under his voice. "Mom, do you think Daddy can see me? Or, when I grow up, will I remember what he looked like?" I answered the best I could, but every answer felt like I was erasing Andrew Moore, replacing him with vague memories and half-truths about a man who worked a lot but loved you very much. The truth was, I hadn't processed any of it. I'd put my grief on a shelf like an old book I didn't want to open. But there are only so many times you can walk past that shelf before the weight starts to crack it. One evening, after putting Liam to bed, I found myself scrolling through vacation packages online. I hadn't been anywhere in years, not since before Andrew's death. At first, it felt wrong, like I was betraying something sacred. But then I looked at Liam's closed bedroom door and thought, he deserves happy memories too. That's how I ended up with 2 tickets to San Diego, 1 hotel room near the beach, and a week blocked off on my work calendar. It felt reckless, like jumping into a cold lake, but also strangely freeing. This wasn't just about sunshine and ocean views. It was about telling myself I was still allowed to live. When I told Liam, his eyes went wide and his mouth fell open like he'd just been given a superpower. "The beach? For real!" he shouted, bouncing on the couch. He wrapped his arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering, "You're gonna smile more there, right, Mom?" That simple question lodged in my chest like a pebble you can't swallow. I kissed the top of his head and said, "I'll try, honey. I'll really try." That night, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights of Denver, thinking about how different my life had become. I used to dream about exotic vacations with Andrew, clinking champagne glasses on some European balcony. Now, just booking a simple trip to California felt like climbing Everest. But as I packed Liam's favorite swim trunks and sunscreen, a thought crossed my mind I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, this is the start of something better. I had no idea then how right and how wrong that thought would be. The morning of our flight, Liam was bouncing through the house like it was Christmas. He dragged his little rolling suitcase behind him, the wheels clattering on the hardwood as he shouted, "San Diego, here we come!" His joy was contagious. For the first time in years, I felt that flutter of excitement I thought I'd buried with Andrew's death certificate. The airport was its usual chaos. People rushing past with coffee cups, security lines snaking forever, the dull hum of tired travelers trying to make their connections. Liam held my hand the entire time, his tiny fingers gripping mine with a mix of excitement and nervousness. We boarded our flight, and as we found our seats, he pressed his face to the window and whispered, "We're really going, Mom. We're really doing this." The flight was full but calm. People settled in, pulling out headphones, books, or neck pillows. I tried to relax, telling myself this trip was about letting go of the past, about new memories. But then I noticed Liam staring down the aisle, his little brow furrowing in confusion. "Mom," he whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Is that Dad?" My heart stopped. I turned my head slowly, afraid of what I'd see. A man, maybe 2 rows ahead, sat sideways in his seat, talking to a young blonde woman beside him. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed most of his face and a pair of dark sunglasses. Something about the slope of his shoulders, the way his hands moved as he spoke, it was painfully familiar. I forced a shaky laugh. "Sweetie, no. You must be thinking of someone else." But then he shifted slightly, and my stomach turned to ice. There it was, that small scar under the jawline, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. A scar I had kissed 100 times in another life. Liam whispered, "Mom, I'm serious. That's Dad." I couldn't breathe. For 3 years, I'd told myself Andrew was gone, that I had buried every shred of hope. And yet, here I was on a random flight to San Diego, staring at a man who looked exactly like my dead husband, alive and laughing with another woman. I gripped Liam's hand. "It's probably just someone who looks like him. Honey, people can look alike." But my voice trembled, betraying the lie. I turned back to the window, willing my pulse to slow, but every nerve in my body screamed to look again. As the flight took off, I kept stealing glances, memorizing every detail. The way he leaned in to listen to the woman, the casual way his fingers tapped on the armrest, exactly how Andrew used to when he was thinking. I told myself it wasn't possible. That grief was playing tricks on me. But deep down, a whisper echoed in my head. What if it really is him? For the rest of the flight, I sat frozen, my thoughts spiraling between shock and anger and something far more dangerous. Hope. When the wheels touched down and passengers started gathering their bags, I made a choice that surprised even me. I stayed seated, clutching Liam's backpack, waiting for the man to leave first, so I wouldn't have to see his face again. Or maybe because I was too afraid I would see it clearly. But Liam wasn't done. He turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "Mom," he looked right at me. He smiled. And just like that, my entire world tilted. San Diego greeted us with warm sunlight and the smell of salt in the air, a welcome change from Denver's dry chill. Liam was still buzzing from the flight, talking about how the ocean looked from the window, how big the waves must be, how he couldn't wait to build the biggest sandcastle ever. I smiled, trying to stay present, but my mind was stuck on that man from the plane. It had to be coincidence, I told myself again and again. People look alike all the time, but that scar, that posture, even the way his hand rested on the seat back, it was all too familiar. And Liam, kids don't imagine things like that, not with that level of certainty. By the time we checked into the hotel, I'd convinced myself to let it go. This trip was supposed to be about healing, not digging up ghosts. We had a balcony view of the ocean, and when Liam saw it, he gasped like someone had handed him a treasure chest. He spent the evening running between the window and the TV, chattering about seashells and dolphins. For a few hours, I felt normal again. That night, after Liam had drifted off, I stepped onto the balcony, breathing in the ocean breeze. It was quiet, peaceful, until I heard voices from the balcony below. At first, it was just muffled arguing, like any couple spat on vacation. But then I froze. That voice, that cadence. "Do you ever care about anything besides money?" A man snapped below, frustration laced in every word. My stomach dropped. My hands gripped the railing so hard my knuckles whitened. That voice. I would have known it anywhere. I didn't even have to hear every word. I could hear the rhythm, the exact way he emphasized his syllables when he was angry. A woman, young, judging by the tone, shot back, "Don't start with me, Andrew. I told you what I wanted from the beginning." Andrew. My knees went weak, and I had to steady myself against the balcony door. It wasn't possible. It wasn't supposed to be possible. I crouched slightly, just enough to peer down without being obvious. There he was, same broad shoulders, same familiar way he gestured when he talked, wearing a t-shirt and shorts. The wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses were gone, and there was no mistaking him now. Andrew Harris, my dead husband, was standing a single floor below me, very much alive and arguing with another woman. My first instinct was to storm down there, demand answers, scream all the questions that had been buried for 3 years. But my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I stood there, shaking, listening to snippets of their fight. "You think dragging me to some cheap hotel in San Diego makes up for everything?" she yelled. "It's a 4-star hotel, Chloe," he snapped back. Chloe. So that was her name. I backed away, pressing a hand over my mouth. My heart felt like it might break all over again, not from losing him, but from finding him, alive, smiling at another woman, living a life I wasn't even allowed to know existed. When I finally stepped back inside, Liam stirred in his sleep and mumbled, "Mom." I knelt next to him, brushing hair from his forehead. "Shoo, it's okay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." He sighed and rolled over, completely unaware that his entire world had just shifted. Mine had too. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, one thought running like wildfire through my mind. He's alive. Andrew is alive. And I had no idea what to do with that truth. The next morning, I woke up hoping it had all been some cruel dream. But one look at the balcony below reminded me it hadn't. Andrew Harris, my dead husband, was alive, breathing and staying one floor under me with a woman named Chloe. I moved through the day on autopilot, smiling for Liam as we explored the beach, but my chest felt tight, like every breath was borrowed. I told myself I'd focus on Liam and let the rest go, but when night fell and Liam drifted to sleep, curiosity and anger got the better of me. I slipped on my wide sunglasses, tied my hair back, and walked down to the hotel bar. The place was quiet, lit with soft amber lamps and the hum of a small jazz trio in the corner. And there he was, sitting alone at the bar, a drink in hand, looking tired and older but unmistakably Andrew. He didn't see me. He was too busy staring at the glass like it held all the answers he'd been chasing. My legs moved before I could think. I sat 2 seats away, trying to keep my voice low and casual. "Rough night." He looked up, startled, then gave me a weary half-smile. "You could say that." His voice, God, that voice, rolled over me like a wave. "Want to talk about it?" I asked, forcing my tone to sound like I was just making small talk with a stranger. Andrew shrugged. "Girlfriend drama. You know how it is." I pretended to laugh, even as my stomach churned. Girlfriend drama. This man had faked his death and left his wife and child behind, only to be arguing about hotel quality with someone new. "She doesn't get me," he continued, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Thinks I'm some boring old guy trying to play young again. Maybe she's right." He glanced at me then, eyes searching like he was trying to place me. I held my breath and looked down at my drink. "What do you want her to see?" I asked quietly. He chuckled, a bitter sound, that I'm not just some guy with money, that I've been through hell and back, that I'm trying to do better, but no one ever sees the big picture. He paused, then shook his head. "Forget it. You don't want to hear my sob story." "I'm a good listener," I said softly. Inside, my heart was pounding. Hell and back? He had no idea. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. 3 years ago, I lost everything. Thought I was done for. Had to start over from scratch. Leave people behind I didn't want to leave. But you can't explain that to everyone. Sometimes you just disappear. I gripped my glass, so hard I thought it might break. Disappear? That's what he called abandoning us. Disappearing? I wanted to scream, to tell him who I was, to drag him upstairs to see his son sleeping in blissful ignorance. But I didn't. I just sat there, nodding like a stranger while my world tilted. Andrew finished his drink and stood, giving me a polite nod. Thanks for listening. You're easier to talk to than most people I know. I managed a tight smile. Anytime. And then he walked away, leaving me staring at the bar top, shaking with a mix of fury and something I hated to admit, relief. Relief, because the voice, the face, the man, they were real. He was alive. But now I had to face a terrifying question. What was I going to do about it? The following afternoon should have been perfect. The sun was warm but not blistering. The breeze carried that salty smell that always made me feel like life could start over, and Liam was happily building what he called the strongest sandcastle in California. I sat on a striped towel nearby, watching him dig and shape towers while sipping from a bottle of water. For the first time in days, I almost forgot about Andrew almost. Then I heard a woman shouting. I turned instinctively, scanning the crowded beach until I saw her. Chloe, the young woman from the balcony. She was kneeling beside someone sprawled in the sand. My heart froze. It was him. Andrew was lying on his side, pale and unnaturally still. One arm twisted awkwardly beneath him. Chloe was frantic, shouting his name, shaking his shoulder, but he didn't respond. For one split second, I considered staying where I was. After all, he wasn't my problem anymore. But then I saw Liam watching, wide-eyed, gripping his sand shovel like a lifeline. Mom, is that? I didn't let him finish. Stay here, sweetheart. I called, already running. When I reached Andrew, his breathing was shallow, his pulse faint but present. Years ago, I'd taken a CPR course for work. Muscle memory kicked in. I rolled him carefully onto his back, tilting his head to clear his airway. He's breathing, I said, more to myself than to Chloe, who was still sobbing. Probably heat stroke or dehydration. I shaded his face with my towel and barked, "Go! Get someone from the hotel or call 911." Chloe nodded and sprinted off. It was surreal, kneeling there on the sand, holding the wrist of the man who had faked his death and shattered my life. Part of me wanted to let go, to stand up and walk away. But I didn't, because even after everything, there was still this reflex inside me to save him. Andrew stirred, eyelids fluttering. He groaned, his voice low and disoriented. "Megan." I froze. He had recognized me. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's me." His eyes opened fully, confusion flooding his face as he focused on me. You're really here." "Alive, just like you," I said, my voice trembling with a sharp edge I hadn't planned. Chloe returned with a hotel staff member carrying a first aid kit. He knelt beside us, checking Andrew's vitals while I stepped back, wiping my sandy hands on my shorts. My pulse was still racing and not from running. The staff member helped Andrew sit up, offering him water and instructions to rest in the shade. Chloe hovered, glaring at me like I was some stranger intruding, which in her world I guess I was. Andrew's gaze stayed locked on me. "Megan, please, we need to talk." I stood, brushing sand from my legs, my expression neutral. "Not here. Tonight, 10 o'clock, the hotel bar." He nodded, still looking shaken, not just from the collapse, but from seeing me, very much alive and standing right in front of him after 3 years of believing he'd erase me from his life. I walked back to Liam, who had abandoned his castle and was staring at us with a frown. "Mom, is that really Dad?" he whispered. I crouched down, pulling him into a hug. "We'll talk about it, sweetheart. But for now, let's just head back inside." As we walked toward the hotel, my mind reeled. Tonight, I would finally hear the truth. And I wasn't sure which terrified me more, that he had a good reason for what he did, or that he didn't. The hotel bar was quieter than the night before. Just a handful of guests scattered around sipping cocktails and scrolling through their phones. I arrived early, needing a moment to settle my nerves. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I wrapped them around a glass of water and tried to breathe. At exactly 10 o'clock, Andrew walked in. No hat, no sunglasses, no way to hide. He looked older, lines etched around his mouth and eyes, a hint of gray in his hair, but still undeniably Andrew Harris. My husband. My dead husband. He approached cautiously, like I might bolt or slap him across the face. Honestly, I hadn't ruled out either. "Megan," he said softly, almost like a prayer. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, waiting. Finally, I said, "You have 2 minutes to tell me why I buried an empty urn and spent 3 years raising your son alone." He winced, rubbing his hands together like a man trying to wash off something that wouldn't come off. "I didn't mean for it to be like that," he said. "I had to disappear, Megan. I had no choice." "You had no choice but to fake your death? To let me tell a 5-year-old boy that his father was gone forever?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "Make me understand that, Andrew. Make me understand why I've been grieving someone who was alive this whole time." He swallowed hard, eyes flicking away. "I was in trouble. Bad trouble. You know about that startup investment I was working on? It wasn't just a business deal, Megan. I borrowed money from the wrong people. People who don't forgive mistakes. When the deal went south, they threatened me and you." I stared, unsure if I wanted to laugh or cry. "So instead of coming to me, you staged an accident and disappeared? You let me think you were dead because it was easier than telling me the truth." "It wasn't easier," he said quickly. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I thought if I stayed, you and Liam would be in danger. So I left. I cut ties, changed my name, paid back every cent I owed. I've spent the last 3 years trying to build a life where no one could hurt me or you again." My eyes burned, tears threatening to spill, but I refused to let them. "And Chloe? Is she part of this safe new life too?" He flinched, then nodded reluctantly. "I met her after. She doesn't know anything about my past." I sat back, crossing my arms. "You let me grieve you for 3 years, Andrew. You let Liam grow up thinking his dad was gone forever, and you were sipping cocktails by the ocean with someone else. Do you even understand what that did to us?" He looked down, shame radiating off him like heat. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I had to see you. I had to see Liam. I had to know if there was even a chance to make things right." The tears came then, but not for him, for me. For the years I spent clawing my way out of grief while he hid behind a new name and a new girlfriend. "You don't get to decide when to come back," I said quietly. "You don't get to walk in here and act like we can just pick up where we left off." Andrew reached out, but I pulled back. "Megan, please. Let me be a father again. Let me explain to Liam. I'm begging you." I stood, pushing my chair back slowly. "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. at the Hotel Cafe. You can see him, but after that, we'll see where this goes." And then I walked out, my legs trembling, but my spine straight. I finally had the truth, but it didn't feel like closure. It felt like the start of another storm I wasn't sure I could weather. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a mistake agreeing to this. Letting Andrew see Liam felt like opening a door I had welded shut 3 years ago. What if it hurt Liam more than it helped? What if it reopened wounds we had finally learned to live with? Liam, however, woke up thrilled. He thought we were just going to breakfast. "Do they have pancakes, Mom? Please say they have pancakes," he said, tugging on his sneakers. I forced a smile. "They have pancakes, sweetheart. Don't worry." By the time we reached the Hotel Cafe, Andrew was already there, sitting at a corner table, nervously tapping his fingers. When Liam saw him, he froze, his face scrunched up like he was trying to solve a puzzle too big for him. "Mom," he whispered, "that's him. That's really him, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, honey, that's your dad." Liam didn't run to him like in the movies. He walked carefully, eyes locked on Andrew, and stood across the table, staring. Andrew's eyes glistened as he knelt to meet him. "Hi, buddy," he said softly, his voice breaking. "It's me. It's Dad." Liam's lip trembled. "But you were gone. Mom said you." He stopped, choking on the words. Andrew's face crumpled. I know, and I'm so sorry. I made a big mistake. I thought I was protecting you and your mom, but I hurt you instead." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Liam stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around Andrew's neck. Andrew held him like he might never let go, his shoulders shaking. I looked away, blinking hard, because whatever my feelings for Andrew were, Liam had just gotten a piece of his heart back. They sat down, and Andrew ordered pancakes and orange juice for Liam, coffee for himself. The conversation was awkward at first. Liam asked about where Andrew had been, what he'd been doing, and Andrew gave vague but honest answers about traveling for work and fixing some big problems. I let him handle it, resisting the urge to correct or add details. At one point, Liam leaned in and whispered, "Did you miss me?" Andrew swallowed hard. "More than anything in this world." That was all it took. Liam smiled, small at first, then wide, and started talking about school, soccer, and the sandcastle he'd built yesterday. Andrew listened like every word was gold, nodding, laughing at the right moments, his eyes drinking in every expression on our son's face. When breakfast ended, Liam tugged on Andrew's hand. "Can you come to the beach with us today? Please." Andrew looked at me, silently asking permission. I hesitated, but finally nodded. For a little while, the three of us walked down to the water, and for an hour it almost felt normal. Andrew and Liam built sandcastles together, just like I had dreamed they would years ago, laughing when the tide took one of the towers. I watched them, my heart torn in two directions, grateful that Liam had this moment, but painfully aware of all the moments we had lost. When it was time to leave, Liam hugged Andrew again and said, "Can we see you tomorrow too?" Andrew glanced at me. "We'll see, buddy. One step at a time." On the way back to the hotel, Liam's voice was bright, excited. "Mom, maybe he can come home with us. Maybe we can be like before." I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know the answer. The door I had welded shut was wide open now, and what came through it might change everything for better or worse. That evening, after Liam fell asleep, I sat on the balcony staring out at the ocean. Waves rolled in steady and calm, so unlike the storm inside my chest. Seeing Andrew with Liam had been healing in a way I hadn't expected, but it also brought back a raw ache I'd worked so hard to bury. Andrew knocked on the balcony door softly. I let him step out, his eyes cautious, as if unsure how close he was allowed to stand. "He's amazing," Andrew said quietly. "You did such a good job with him, Megan." I crossed my arms. "I didn't have a choice. You were gone." He nodded, guilt etched deep on his face. "I know, and I'm sorry. I can't take back what I did, but I want to be in his life now. Even if you never forgive me, please don't shut me out from him." I studied him, searching for any sign of the man I used to love, the man I married, not the one who ran away and let us grieve him for 3 years. "You don't get to walk back into our lives and act like we can pick up where we left off," I said firmly. "You faked your death, Andrew. You left me to explain to our son why his father was gone forever. You don't just erase that because you feel guilty now." He lowered his head. "I'm not asking you to take me back. I know I lost that right, but I am asking for a chance to be his dad again. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll move slowly. I'll respect your boundaries. Just please, Megan, don't keep me out of his life." For a long moment, all I could hear was the sound of the waves. Part of me wanted to tell him to disappear again and never come back. But I couldn't ignore the look on Liam's face when he hugged his dad that morning, or the way he laughed on the beach like he hadn't in years. "You can be in his life," I said finally, "but on my terms. You'll call before you visit, no surprise drop-ins, no disappearing again. And if you ever lie to him again, about anything, we're done. Permanently." Relief washed over Andrew's face. Thank you. I promise, Megan, I won't screw this up again. I turned back to the ocean, my voice steady now. Good, because I'm not the same woman you left behind. I built a life without you, and I'm proud of it. I don't need you, Andrew. Liam doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be honest. Andrew nodded, blinking quickly. You're stronger than I remember. I had to be, I said softly. You made sure of that. He left quietly after that, and I stayed on the balcony, letting the salty breeze dry the tears I didn't even realize had fallen. This wasn't the fairy tale reunion Liam might have hoped for, but it was honest. And honesty was something I could build on, even if it was just me and Liam moving forward, with Andrew playing a small, carefully monitored role in our lives. When I finally went to bed, Liam stirred and murmured in his sleep, Mom, we're happy, right? I brushed the hair from his forehead and whispered, Yes, sweetheart. We're happy and we're going to be okay. For the first time in 3 years, I believed it.